Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this presentation, I will show that modern economic theory is very different from what it claims to be. In fact, economic theory, which I will call ET1%, is a manifestation of the power of the top 1% to shape the narrative. It creates claims for justice, equity, and efficiency of an economic system, which is manifestly immoral and unjust. There is a large number of books and articles which explain how moral judgments are hidden within the framework of contemporary economic theory. One of the most important among these is the book by Hausman and MacPherson, Economic Analysis, Moral Philosophy and Public Policy. Another article is Julie Nelson on Poisoning the Well, How Economic Theory Damages the Moral Imagination. Robert Nelson, Economics as Religion, shows how many beliefs are held by economists as religious beliefs, ideology which doesn't require any confirmation by facts. Similarly, the Hill and Myatt Economics Anti-Textbook shows how economics justifies a huge number of immoral and exploitative arrangements under the guise of an objective scientific theory. And similarly, my own paper on the normative foundations of scarcity shows that the fundamental concept of scarcity is actually built upon three moral arguments. So to start with Hausman and MacPherson, one of their arguments is that utility maximization is held to be a rational theory. This is a moral judgment about how people should behave. That is, we all want to be rational, but actually this is not descriptively accurate. This is not a positive theory, because enormous amounts of empirical evidence show that people do not actually maximize, they satisfy, they try to achieve something that is satisfactory without trying to search for the best possible alternative. The normative judgment that people should maximize is not a good judgment, in the sense that maximization behavior is often not the best in any moral sense or any social sense. It is a narrowly confined consideration of purely individual objectives. For example, in the prisoner's dilemma, both parties can benefit by cooperating with each other, but privately each party has an incentive to betray the other and gain private benefit at the expense of the society. Now, economic theory says that this is what people should do and this is what people actually do, when both of these are wrong. In fact, people do not behave individually selfishly as economists believe, and they should not. This is neither good descriptively nor is it good normatively. Similarly, Robert Nelson in Economics and Religion shows many ideological commitments of economists. One of these is that economists value efficiency over equity. For example, in free trade, which all economists believe in, they say that we should allow an inefficient industry to go out of business. Then all of the factors of production will automatically find their way to a more productive use. Now, in fact, this doesn't take into account the fact that people are attached to their communities and people value their social milieu and environment. So, in fact, in the global financial crisis, a large amount of unemployment resulted in many different communities, different amounts in different communities. Studies show that people did not move out of high unemployment communities. So the costs of destruction of family, destruction of society, destruction of community, these are not measured by economists, because this is not part of their value judgment. They only value the capacity to produce goods, material goods, and they do not value the richness of the fabric of human lives. So this is a value judgment. Julie Nelson, in her article on poisoning the well, shows that people actually believe in generosity, kindness, cooperation, sacrifice, uh, and social responsibility. However, economic theory trains us to think of this as irrational. It also teaches us that selfishness is good, and selfishness actually leads to social welfare. For example, Mankiw states in the introduction to his book that it is selfishness and not love and kindness that leads to efficient market outcomes. Similarly, the Hill and Myatt Economics Anti-Textbook shows how the concept of marginal product of labor and capital was invented to justify the exploitation of labor by capitalists. And the theory says that both the capitalist and the laborer earn the fair amount that they should, which is namely their marginal contribution to product. In fact, this theory suffers from many serious defects, including the fact that capital cannot be measured, and more than that, while capital does make a contribution, the question is, does the ownership of capital entitle you to a reward? To make it even clearer, the economists have hidden the financial capital, that is pure money, with the machines. Now, for the machines, one can justify that since the machines actually contribute to production, that they should earn a rent. But is the same true of money? Islam emphatically says no, money cannot earn a return. The ownership of money is not a productive activity, unlike the ownership of machines, which can be earned for rental. So by this merger, economists deceive us into believing that interest payments are justified, because interest payments are just another type of rental for machines. In a similar maneuver, in the early part of the century, in the early economic theory, there was a class of landlords called rentiers, and all they did was that they rented their land for profits. And these were widely recognized to be parasites because they did nothing but they earned rent. So Henry George made a very popular proposal that we should tax the land ownership, and in order to fight against that, economic theory merged the land with the physical capital. Now, interestingly, Islam also offers us the wealth tax, which is far more efficient than the income tax that is currently in use. But the wealthy people oppose wealth tax and prefer income tax, which falls mostly on laborers. So all of these hidden values are built into economics. In my own paper on the normative foundations of scarcity, I have shown that the concept of scarcity is actually built on three normative principles. One of them is that all the wants are supposed to be treated as equal, and whether they are natural or artificial. In fact, Islam teaches us that idle desires are not to be fulfilled, and trying to fulfill these is to lead to Jahannam. So basic needs is definitely worth fulfilling, but they are not on par with idle desires. Another aspect of scarcity is that it arises from the fact that poor people don't have the money to express their demands, while rich people have infinite amounts of wants. As somebody said, the planet has enough for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. Since economists equate need and greed, so they create this problem of scarcity, which would not exist if we took as our mission to satisfy the needs of everybody without worrying about satisfying the wants. Economic theory also says that it is efficient, the supply and demand equilibrium, whereas in fact the supply and demand equilibrium is based on the fact that the money which backs the demand is what creates demand. So if poor families demand milk, this demand is not part of the effective demand if their parents don't have the money to buy this. On the other hand, the millionaire's desire for anything automatically is part of the effective demand because he has the money to back this. So in conclusion, there is a huge number of absolutely ridiculous and extremely nauseating value judgments built into the foundations of economic theory, which accounts for the really immoral and unjust and inequitable system that we see, where a few people have all of the money and billions are starving and in miserable conditions. Economic theories pretend to an objectivity which it doesn't have, because it is the only way to sell the otherwise absurd norms to the public.